Welcome back to NTV Weekend Edition. As we head into 2025, it is that time of the year when we look at what transpired in the medium and small scale business sectors. This was a year when the sector suffered several setbacks, including heavy taxation, a strike that paralyzed the economy over EFRIS, among others. We have John Walugembe, the Executive Director of the Federation of SMEs. Mr. John Walugembe, welcome to Talk of the Nation.
Thank you for having me here. It's always a pleasure to join you to discuss the state of the sector and the economy as a whole.
The pleasure is mine. Let's look at some of the challenges that the sector faced in 2024. There was concern over the over-taxation of businesses, and some said this would slow down the growth. What areas were affected mostly by over-taxation?
Well, there are certain things that we agree upon with government. A is that there is a narrow tax base. What that means is that the very few people who pay tax are paying very many taxes. There's no doubt about that. Because if you're an employee, for instance, you pay as you earn, and then if you're an employer, of course, that all you do is to collect, but then you have to contribute to the person's NSSF, then you have the corporation tax, then you have the value-added tax, and so a number of other things that, local service tax, for instance, and all kinds of charges and so on. So there's a feel among the business community that the burden is too much. And government also agrees that there's need to expand the tax base. That means that we need to bring more people into the net, particularly those in the informal sector. And we also need to look at some high net worth individuals who are not paying their fair share. So these are discussions that I think ought to continue. They are not just specific to the 2024. I think the challenge of expanding the tax base still remains and ought to continue being discussed.
Well, Mr. John Walugembe, the 2024 was a year when EFRIS became a thing.
Yes.
And also a justification for a strike by the trading community.
Correct.
What lessons have we learned from this?
Well, the lessons are that if you're trying to bring something new, you have to invest in educating people. I think there was limited education by URA. Some people looked at EFRIS as a tax. It was simply a solution, that would also help them in the end, but because the education was not sufficient, there was a problem. And then the rollout itself has had its own challenges. There was a certain level of high-handedness, particularly in the Kikubo area. So I think that's also something that ought to be learned. The other issue that traders, and I think SMEs have to learn, is that certain things are irreversible. They were caused, we need to eliminate EFRIS altogether. And we took the position that EFRIS cannot go away. We simply need to ask for time to adapt. We need to ask that URA understands and improves the way it rolls it out. But you can't eliminate EFRIS. And I think those of us who took that position have been proven right, that you can't remove such a solution. Digitalization is the way to go, and you can't just say that we shall eliminate such a solution that is helping URA to address some inefficiencies and address people who are taking advantage of the VAT system to make money or not to pay their fair share as well. So I think for EFRIS, we should continue educating traders, SMEs. We should ensure that the system itself is more user-friendly. There's need for making certain tweaks in certain areas to make sure that it's better suited. And then we should also look at raising the threshold for value-added tax. We feel it's too low. 150 million brings in people that shouldn't be in the VAT threshold to start with. So government should start that discussion. Maybe raise it to 500 million, maybe to $1 billion. I think that discussion ought to happen.
Well, in the same year, 2024, there has been a plan by government to end all imports of second-hand clothing to be replaced by locally made products. What's the progress? What's the observation?
No, it's a good ambition, but it's not achievable. I think at least what government needs to do is to build supply-side capacities. There's definitely sense in investing in our cotton, textiles, and apparel sector. I've severally mentioned that we can generate close to 4 million jobs very easily of unskilled and semi-skilled Ugandans that are maybe working in the Arab world or whatever. But for us to be able to harness those job opportunities, there has to be investment. And I think at the moment that is not taking place. Yes, so simply banning the importation of second-hand clothes will mean that you are eliminating jobs because that sector employs very many people. That estimation is about 600,000. Now, if you eliminate those jobs without creating alternatives, you create a problem. And then not everyone can afford first-hand clothes because they're expensive. So how do you address some of those contradictions? So I think there's a long way to go, and we need to continue exploring that aspiration.
Well, in 2024, we still have seen trade bans and general challenges in maintaining a smooth trade order between Uganda and some of the East African counterparts.
Correct.
Have we settled our differences? And what is the way forward?
There are no differences. I think every time that you trade, there are going to be some frictions. And I keep saying this, that, you know, trade disputes are normal. You know, that they are normal, and they shouldn't be conflated with disputes in the political kind of arena. Now, the ESC this year, for instance, has resolved 10 non-tariff barriers, and many of them unfortunately came from Kenya. So, for instance, they placed a 25% tax on our eggs and on our onions and on certain other things, and we are glad that they were resolved. But unfortunately, I feel that we don't have a robust trade dispute resolution mechanism at the ESC level, and this is something we need to look into. These are issues that ought not to be solved at the ministerial level or the presidential level. They should be solved by technocrats as and when they arise, and also countries like Uganda should take advantage of retaliatory measures. We seem to be the gentleman or gentlewoman in the room. We never want to retaliate, and if we don't retaliate, it means we shall end up being victims of these kinds of actions, unfriendly actions in the trade arena. So I would urge our government to once in a while retaliate and see what happens. We can negotiate, but up until when? Today it's eggs, tomorrow it's sugar, the other day it's this, the other day it's that. So, you know, retaliating is acceptable.
Wouldn't that be a dangerous proposition?
Dangerous how? You make the other party wake up. Tanzania has used it effectively against Kenya. It has worked. And I think we should invoke it once in a while. I know that the president is a Pan-African. President's views are well known. But I think people in the Ministry of Trade should use the toolbox that they have.
All right. Mr. John Walugembe, there was the consolidation of fuel importation with only Uganda National Oil Company, UNOC, responsible for bringing in fuel in the country. How has this affected business in Uganda? Well, the marketing companies say this has been a positive thing and has contributed to the lowering of prices. So from the consumer perspective, it's a good thing. You know, I was opposed to it because I'm not a fan of monopolies. You know, I always feel that there's always, whether it's for the good or whatever, so it's good to have fair competition. So I felt that this UNOC thing gave them certain level of monopoly. Well, they eliminated the Kenyan middlemen, so they were able to give the final consumer some advantage, which is good. So I think from that angle, we need to applaud government for taking that decision. So some of us can admit and say maybe we were wrong. Yes. Apart from the fear of monopoly, what were your other concerns about the issue?
No, our view was that government should import directly. So, for instance, from Saudi Arabia should sign government-to-government deals, because if UNOC simply replaces the middlemen, and so the advantage may not be substantial, the reduction may not be substantial. If you look at the prices of fuel, yes, there has been the reduction, it's not substantial. So we just felt that if government is coming in as a monopoly, then that's okay. Then sign a deal, say, with Aramco in Saudi Arabia or with the UAE counterpart or whatever, so that you're able to get, you know, an excellent advantage. And maybe this is something, you know, can explore further. Yeah.
All right. 2024, we've also seen an extensive expenditure on building the railway network as an alternative to road transport. How will this impact business in Uganda? Will it grow into a viable option to cargo transportation? Are we too late?
No, I think it's never too late, and we want to appreciate government. They are going to invest in the SGR from Tororo, the eastern leg from Tororo to Kampala. Just to explain to our viewers, if I'm bringing a 40-foot container from Mombasa on road, I spend roughly $3,500. If I were to use the standard gauge railway, then I would spend about $1,500. So you are making a saving of $2,000 per container. This is huge in terms of profits, in terms of the cost of the final consumer and so on. So I think that SGR is a good way to go, and we are happy that Uganda has begun. Of course, we are on the tail end of things. Kenya started before us, Tanzania started before us. So if we are good in execution, we've got this Turkish company to help us construct. We hope it will do a good job. And if it does a good job, then it will be to the advantage of the consumer, to the advantage of the business people that import using this route.
Well, Mr. John Walugembe, as we come close to the end of our conversation,
yes,
whenever the year is coming to an end,
yeah,
whether it's in personal life or business,
yeah,
people tend to look back and review, yeah, what a year has been. Yeah. Well, in your opinion,
correct,
has this been a good year for growth in the medium and small-scale businesses?
No, I think it has been a good year. Because, you know, SME sector cannot grow in isolation. It has to grow within the overall context. So if we look at the economy as a whole, we've seen stability, we've seen inflation being curtailed, we've seen improvements in GDP per capita, we've seen more people getting out of poverty thanks to the PDM initiative. So we are seeing slow and steady progress. Of course, the challenges remain, issues of taxation, issues of the business environment, issues of the cost of credit, issues of market access and non-tariff barriers, but these will be resolved and they cannot be eliminated. Even in the EU, even in the US, you still have these contradictions. You see now the US and Canada, the US and Mexico. So there's no perfect place in terms of trade disputes and so on. So I think let's keep working as we go into 2025.
Well, and finally,
yes,
what can small and medium business owners hope for in 2025? I
keep saying that SMEs need to be positive. They need to look at 2025 as a good year. They shouldn't just be, they shouldn't just daydream and make resolutions, but they should work towards those resolutions. They should look at macro factors and hope that things might change, but they should also look within and say, what improvements can I make within my business? How can I market better? How can I treat my employees better? How can I expand, or how can I consolidate? Whatever it is, you need to ensure that you focus on those fundamentals that can help your business to succeed in 2025.
Well, Mr. John Walugembe, thank you so much for talking to us.
You're welcome, and thank you for inviting me.
And at the end of 2025, I hope to have you back here and tell us more about that.